everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie and this is all about my life after gastric bypass surgery. In today's video, I just want to delve a little bit into why I'm not worried about my eating habits, why I'm not worried about the fact that I can eat like twice as much as I could after surgery, why I'm stress eating but it's not really worrying me, and just a little bit more insight into my particular situation and why this is so important to me. This is actually a really big, great thing going on despite what it might feel like. So a quick disclaimer before I get too far into this video. I am extremely tired. I am extremely stressed. I'm pretty hot. I feel like my face is pretty flushed and it's pretty obvious that I'm like uncomfortable. So I'm going to do the best I can at getting through this video. What's really unfortunate is that I feel like I have a lot to say about this topic and I would love to just sit down and really flesh it out professionally and really kind of lay all my points out there. I just don't think it's going to happen in this video or anytime soon with the way that everything is in my life right now. I'm just amazed that I'm getting a video out this week. What might be fun to do in the future is more of a live stream, because I do feel like this topic can be discussed in a lot more detail, and so something interactive for a longer period of time in a future live stream might be something where I delve into some more information and some more details about this. So if this just sort of ends up scratching the surface of what you're interested in or what I want to talk about, I will probably make time to do that in the future. As I said, I'm absolutely exhausted. It just hit me probably about 30 to 45 minutes ago where I just realized I'm so done. I'm so done with the day and I just want to curl up and go to sleep, but I've got so much to do for the rest of the evening. It's not going to happen. How many of you can relate with that? Part of the reason I'm so tired is kind of directly related to the topic of today's video, and it's about all the stress that I'm going through. And today specifically, I want to delve into my eating habits. And that is directly related to stress. As much as I'd love to say that I'm over stress eating and, you know, bad eating habits, I'm not. And that's always going to be my go-to coping mechanism. And so right now, when I'm super stressed out, I'm not sleeping well, there's a lot going on and a lot of things that I'm having to keep track of, my first go-to coping mechanism is to eat. But the very first thing that I want to say about that is that my eating habits when I'm stress eating and I'm coping with food look very different now than they did pre-surgery. My particular journey is one wrapped around eating disorders. It's wrapped around an undiagnosed binge eating disorder. I've always had a hard time overeating, especially when I'm stressed. I would always turn to food. I would always binge until the point of feeling physically uncomfortable, physically in pain, way over the top. That was pretty much my standard response to stress. I can pinpoint multiple extremely stressful times in my life where I turned to this, and I can even remember specific meals because they were so painful and uncomfortable that they were memorable and they stuck with me. My response after surgery and my approach to things may look different than a lot of other people. I recently saw kind of an exchange on Instagram. Somebody had posted that they were eating a Big Mac after surgery. It was their first Big Mac after surgery, and they got a nasty DM from somebody who decided to tell them that they basically needed to act like an influencer if they wanted to be an influencer, and that they were sharing that they were eating bad things and they were being bad examples. That's my, you know, TLDR in a nutshell, what happened. And I'm so grateful that I have never run into that. I have never had anybody say anything negative or tell me that my approach to things is just absolutely wrong. And I'm so grateful for that, for you guys as my returning viewers and my subscribers. You guys have been amazing, and I'm so grateful that I have such a great community of people who are understanding. And I think we all know that we all have different paths through this quicksand that we're in. Again, I'm so grateful I haven't had to deal with that, but it is very prevalent. It is something that a lot of people have to deal with, being shamed about how much they're eating or what they're eating. Those are things that certain people really feel like they just have the freaking answer. I'll tell you right now, none of us have the answer. None of us have the answer. We all are struggling through all these things, especially if this individual who sent out this DM is following this account because they are a weight loss surgery patient or somebody who is thinking about it. They're in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. We're all struggling with different ways to deal with the same problem, which is overeating, overindulging, dealing with this devil on our shoulder that is food and food compulsion. My approach, because it is surrounded in this blanket of eating disorder, of binge eating, is very different. I cannot and I will not restrict myself from eating certain foods because it sends me into a spiral. I have videos showing me in the middle of a spiral where I just can't get a grip and I'm way focused on calories and macros and worrying if I'm making the right decision, which ultimately leads to me overeating. This is well grounded in science. There's a lot of information out there to support that restricting leads to binging. That's my reality. And as I go through this process, I realize that I cannot approach this the same way some people do after surgery, which is to never eat certain foods again. They view this as a reset to their system. They have the surgery and it's an opportunity for them to square away what they should and should not be eating and follow that for the rest of their life, because you're essentially starting over, right? I mean, you have to start with liquids and then thick liquids and then puree. You're basically starting out from when you're a baby and just going forward and resetting your stomach. And I think people think that they can just do that and set the stage for what the rest of their life is going to be like. And in some cases, that's perfectly manageable. In some cases, people can do that and they view this as the opportunity to make that change that they weren't able to do strictly with willpower alone. And that's great. But that is absolutely not how I can and should approach this with a disordered eating past. Because of the prevalence of scientific data that supports that restricting leads to binging, I'm never going to get control over that if my approach is just to say I'm not allowed to have carbs anymore. I'm not allowed to eat pasta anymore. So I eat probably more carbs and more sugar than, you know, a handful of bariatric patients out there. And that may be off-putting to some people because it may seem like the wrong way to go about things. But if I do it any other way, I spiral and I am unable to control myself around food. It's just the reality of it. Can I binge the way that I used to? No, physically my stomach can't handle that. But what I found that I do now, which is great that at least I'm recognizing it, is that my body likes to snack on a bunch of little things all throughout the day and essentially graze. And then I find myself eating a larger quantity of food over a longer period of time rather than sitting down and eating a large quantity of food in a short amount of time like I used to do. I'm still overeating. It's nowhere near the volume that I could before, but it is overeating. It just looks different. I can already tell that I am just all over the place. I'm going to try to keep this as streamlined as I can from point A to point B, but I go off in tangents when I think about this and when I talk about it, and I can feel a little bit of a headache starting. So ultimately what I'm trying to get at is that I don't eat the same way. I don't binge and I don't overindulge the same way that I used to. And so I'm not super concerned, because the main goal is not to be focusing on what I can and cannot eat, which can be a very toxic mentality. It's more about focusing on healing my relationship with food overall and having a healthier balance and an approach to life that I can do for the rest of my life. This is not a diet. This is not a 30-day program where I can just skip carbs for 30 days and I'll be okay in the long run. This is something that I have to do for the rest of my life. Now, that being said, as I talk about how I have noticed that my body has changed a little bit and I'll start grazing throughout the day, it's still something that I need to be mindful of. So just because I'm not worried right now that I am eating more carbs and more sugar than maybe someone else that I'm following on their journey, doesn't mean that I'm just doing everything without thinking anything at all in the world. I am very mindful of what's happening and trying to put a stop to things when I start to notice them go beyond just a little bit of indulging. So for example, today I got really snacky after lunch. I don't think I had enough protein at lunch, so I didn't have anything with enough substance to really make me feel satisfied after lunch. So a couple hours later, I just got very munchy, and all I wanted to eat was like a bunch of junk, and nothing in the house sounded good. I ended up eating some peanut butter and crackers. Is that a terrible solution? No, I mean, it's not the worst in the world, but I realized that all I was doing was looking for that crunchy satisfaction of eating a salty snack. I wasn't addressing the root of the issue, which is that I needed something of substance and with protein. A yogurt or something would have been a much better choice, but I was allowing myself to go for the mouthfeel that I was looking for, the taste and the crunch, rather than, you know, satisfying what my stomach was saying, which is that, hey, we haven't had enough protein, we haven't had enough substance to really feel like we can manage for the rest of the night until dinner. So I made sure after that point that I was focusing on hydration and other things, and was mindful of the fact that that's what I was leaning to, so I wasn't going to continue to do that all the way up until dinner. I kind of nip that in the bud when I recognize it. So staying mindful is what's keeping me grounded. Moving back, if we're just sort of talking as a broad concept of my ability to eat more, when I first started recognizing that I could eat almost twice as much in some cases food than I was able to earlier on in this process, I started really freaking out. You see a lot of people post things online about regain. More specifically, people who have experienced regain have a tendency to say that they did a certain thing or started eating a certain food, and therefore it led to them starting bad eating habits again and regaining all of their weight. And there's so much of that to unpack. I really don't have the time in this particular video to unpack all of that. But ultimately, if you research information and you get a lot of things from surgeons, there's not a lot of evidence to support that eating a certain type of food or eating more carbs than normal is what led you to regain. For example, I had an argument of sorts with somebody months ago about how they said that they regained all their weight because they started eating corn and potatoes again in their life, and they simply cannot eat corn and potatoes if they want to maintain weight loss. Could that be potentially possible for that one particular person? Maybe. Maybe that's something particular with their body and they seem to really react to those kinds of starches. But ultimately, whole foods like eating corn on the cob and potatoes are not in and of themselves going to lead you down the road of gaining all of your weight back. And people are so worried about stretching their stomachs out, and there is this disconnect between what your stomach naturally does and your ability to, you know, stretch to eat foods and store foods for longer periods of time, and it will stretch and shrink and stretch and shrink naturally, and this thought that you have stretched it out permanently and it's the same size as it was before they lopped off a part of it for surgery. There's just not a lot of evidence to support that you can seriously permanently stretch your stomach in such a dramatic way. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of perseverance to eat enough to permanently deal damage to your stomach like that. All of these are perfectly natural parts of the bariatric surgery process and the post-op experience, especially as you get 2, 3, 4, 5+ years after surgery. things just change anatomically, and they are different than when it's first done and you're first going through the trauma of surgery where your restriction is the most. There's a lot of confusion, and I really point a lot of that to the fact that a lot of people are doing this out of the country like I did, but are told to communicate with each other rather than having a surgical support team, because that's just not something that is available if you do this out of the country. And so then a lot of misinformation and a lot of bad advice gets swirling around in these social media spaces that are designed to make you think that they are legitimate sources of information, and people just run amok with not knowing what is normal and what isn't normal after surgery. Bariatric dietitians, dietitians who are specifically trained and knowledgeable about bariatric patients and the procedure and, your anatomy, a lot of them, the reputable ones, will all talk about how the goal is to eat balanced and somewhat normal after surgery. And normal, not as in like your normal, like my normal before surgery. Nobody should eat like that, but a normal balanced way of eating where you should be eating carbs, you should be eating fats, you should be eating vegetables and fruit and protein. But it looks very different this far away from surgery than it does earlier in the process. Now I am no longer at that point where I focus only on protein. Protein is still the highest priority on my plate, and it's still the thing that I want to prioritize the most out of everything that I'm eating, but I'm focusing more on balance now than I am about shoving as much protein in my system as possible. And that's because I can eat more. When you can only eat 3, 4, 5 ounces at a time, that protein is way more important. You need to make sure that the few ounces that you're eating at a time is going to be supporting your body the way that it needs to. And that protein is essential that early on after surgery. But now that I can eat more, I can embrace eating a little bit more and balancing out my meals. So now, instead of focusing on a meal that is 5 ounces of mostly protein and maybe a few bites of like vegetables or something, now I can focus on a meal that is 3 or 4 ounces of protein with a couple decent portions, a couple ounces of some mashed potatoes and a vegetable or something to round out my meal, so that you're getting nutrients from all different areas, not just protein. I think the evolution of the post-op experience is really, really misunderstood by a lot of people, myself included. For the longest time, I was struggling with this too, and it's taken a lot of time and effort on my part to really feel like I understand things a little bit better. And there is so much effort placed on the first few months after surgery and how much weight you're gonna lose and how fast it's dropping and whether or not you're in a stall and all of those things. That first year is insanely fast. It moves so fast, and there's so much going on, and there's so much focus. And then I think a lot of the interest and a lot of people's efforts to put information out there really starts to drop off. And the further you get from surgery, you're in a totally different realm of trying to battle, what it's like to then live the rest of your life post-op, where you don't have the same level of restriction and you don't have the same things that were keeping you on track before. And all of a sudden you're like, how am I supposed to do this long-term post-op? Like, how am I supposed to function? Nobody talks about it. I've said before, maintenance is a whole other beast, and I'm only kind of dabbling in maintenance. I still would like to lose weight, but ultimately I'm maintaining my weight at this time, and I'm okay with that. I'll take it. I'm happy with not gaining weight. That's ultimately where I land, and that's the ultimate response to why I'm not worried about my eating habits. I'm not gaining weight. If you haven't struggled for literally your entire life with being heavy and being on the roller coaster that is losing weight and gaining weight and losing weight and then gaining more than you ever had before and then losing more than you ever have and then gaining even more of that back, and doing that for years and years and years of your life and constantly worried about the fact that you're never fully making progress. If you've never experienced that, then you probably wouldn't understand the point of view where I've gone almost 2 years now where I haven't gained weight. That has never happened. Like, never happened to me. So that's why I'm not worried. Now, if I start to gain weight, if I start to see that there's some bad habits creeping back and I need to really get some of this stuff under control, then that's a different thing. You know, that's something where I definitely will want to figure out how to make that balance between healing my disordered eating past and making sure that I'm still able to make progress and not gain weight. There's a balance there that I'm not fully focusing on right now, because for the first time in my life, I feel like I am a normal person. I'm able to eat food that I enjoy, as well as eating healthy and balanced. I'm able to move and be way more active than I ever have before, and I'm not gaining weight. And in fact, in a big picture, because I love looking at the big picture, I'm still losing weight. It is tiny and it's just absolutely creeping, but it's still there. If you're looking big picture, I am still making a downward trend. So why would I be worried about the fact that I can eat more? Especially because it makes me so happy that I can eat more vegetables. Right after surgery, I was devastated that all I wanted was like a large portion of Brussels sprouts or a large portion of broccoli, and I just couldn't really eat more than a few bites of it because, you know, it's so fibrous and so filling, and I just didn't have the room, and I had to prioritize the protein. Now that I can eat a little bit more, what am I mostly putting on my plate? It's vegetables and fruit. Yes, I'm eating carbs. Yes, I'm eating pasta. Yes, I had a whole handful of Cheez-Its at lunch today. It's not that that isn't part of my life, but the vast majority of what I'm intaking with that extra room has been fruits and vegetables because I love them, but the balance is the most important thing. What I really want people to take away if they're watching this video is that, you know, things can look different for everybody, and this might not be the approach for you. It might not work for you. It might be a terrible thing because some people have a really hard time with moderation, and if they give themselves an inch, they'll take a mile. I totally understand that, and I do relate to that. So, you know, this might not be the answer for you, but the biggest thing I want people to take away from this video is that just because you can eat more does not mean that you are failing and that you are letting bad habits take over your life and that you're going to gain all your weight back, because that is a huge thing that I see. A lot of people are fearful that they're going to start to eat the way that they did before and they'll gain all their weight back and everything will be for nothing. And if you guys are anything like me, the moment I start to wonder, oh my gosh, am I doing that? Is that happening to me? I start freaking out and making it totally worse. I'm sure I'll touch on this subject again in the future because I do think that it is really not talked about enough post-op, and there's enough people far enough out of surgery who just have no idea what they should and shouldn't be doing, and you know what the protocol is when you are at a point where you can eat more and things don't make you feel the same way as they did before. You don't maybe get dumping as often as you did. You find yourself able to eat more sweets and you're not getting sick. All of those things are realities of post-op several years, and I just don't think that people prepare you enough for that. And so I'll probably keep talking about it because that's probably the biggest, most relatable thing that I'm going through right now, is learning to deal with this long term. And what does that mean for me long term? Because that initial massive weight loss and that initial craziness of the surgery is over now, but my journey is not. It's far from over. So if this information was helpful for you, or you like the kinds of videos that I'm putting out where I'm trying to share my experience and my point of view after this surgery and what I have found successful, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because that will tell you when one of my videos goes live. And if you're already a subscriber and you've already done all that stuff, thank you so much. Like, seriously, it's been a whirlwind to see the changes in my channel and the growth and the support. And like I said earlier, I have a great community that follows me and interacts with me, and it has been amazing to have that support and have that kind of interaction that's never been negative and never made me feel ashamed for my own progress and my own journey. So thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate all of you, like, seriously. So make sure you guys are staying happy and healthy and always look at the big picture, and I will see you guys in the next one.